hero again last night, and I made this piece of art. Wow. It's very messy. The creative process was until 1 a.m. last night. It was a good 3 hours making that. It was good. It was really fun. I will actually show it in a second, but I wanted to say I had a couple thoughts about last night. I didn't realize until like spending more time with her, like outside of just like school and other stuff, how similar we are, and that kind of terrifies me. That like little kid part of me that was so lonely finally has people that are similar, you know? The loneliness of being the only person when I was in a small group of people that was similar to me, it's like weirdly validating, but also like, oh, I'm not alone. And that is almost harder because so much of my identity was wrapped up in difference, like not being like people that I was around. And I'm not saying that's now, because I've definitely matured to say there's nothing better about my style. It's simply me. There's like the tiny little art piece in the corner. I can see it. And so I just like didn't know that there were people out there who had the same interest in some books, same passion for some things, and same love for making, and not just in product design stuff, but like art expression, emotional expression, self-expression. I'm like shocked. Like I'm still processing that. The level of like loneliness that's being resolved now is insane. I had another thought, but it's gone now. I talked to my friend last night about like how oftentimes I would become neutral to topics, to kind of allow myself to be likable by everyone, because anybody could project what they wanted onto me. So it was like, well, like, while internally I might be like, I don't really agree with that. Externally I'd be like, oh, this is fine. Like, people pleasing, basic people pleasing. But it's like stuff like I don't know what my music taste was for the longest time. Like it was scary for me to have a music taste because it's like if I have a music taste, then I'm opening myself up for critique, because people would be like, oh, bad or good music taste. It's like, can we stop judging people for things they like? I mean, I know that I can tend to drift into that because if nobody's developed their own sense of style, I can tend to be critical of that, which is the same thing. It's just said differently, and it makes me feel more valid. I know it's still just as wrong, and it's just as judgmental, but it's still more comfortable for me. But yeah, I don't know. It's just like, it's all over the place with that. But yeah, another thing with that, sorry, I was like making my oatmeal while I was still vlogging. I was also thinking about, what I said oh, you know what? I was actually going to tell you. I was thinking about how I was like in high school, and I was talking to my friend Sammy about this last week, and I was realizing that I had these phases that I went through. When I first realized that I was going to die someday, I went through this phase that I would call like permanence. It was this fear of like not, like knowing that I wasn't going to live forever, so I wanted to make things that would outlive me and make my own name, create something that would outlive me extremely, like creating my own permanence to try and escape mortality, like write things, draw things, anything that might outlive me and be able to tell my story, represent me when I'm gone. And so then I obviously wanted to have a perfect story, and then, perfectionism, workaholism, all that stuff. And there's a concept for it. I was reading about it in the book Art and Fear. It's not necessarily like always a bad thing to be driven by like, okay, well, I'm not going to live forever, so I need to make things. But the level of like, I couldn't rest was a lot. But I still think it was better than the second phase I went through, which is erasure, like temporariness, impermanence. And I wanted to erase myself from history to make as little an impact as I possibly could, to make myself smaller physically, emotionally, mentally, to fit with what I thought was expected of me. And it's also an emphasis on what I thought was expected of me, because like I was just doing what I had misread as what I was supposed to do. That include, I think that phase honestly might have gone until last September. It was a sense of impermanence, of like, what is the purpose of trying to do something significant when I could die tomorrow, or when I don't want to have the legacy that's corrupted or a burden to other people. If I built a building, someone would have to tear it down someday, so it's better not to build it, which is such a bad mindset to have, but it is the mindset that I did at that point. Along with like habits and other things, it was really hard for me to maintain. I was able to do them when I had the right like perfectionist mindset with them, like, oh, I'm doing this to make myself more worthy or prove myself or whatever. I was able to do them consistently. That doesn't mean I was doing them well or in a healthy place. I would describe my current mindset and methodology more as impermanent permanence. So I can't control, what comes after. I can't control how people remember me. I can't control the legacy that I build. But I can control my own enjoyment in the process, right? Like I can make it so that I can enjoy my life more, even if I can't necessarily control how people remember it. But I can set myself up for doing things that are fun and challenging, not for the sake of creating this permanent structure, but for the sake of living my own life. I have to live regardless of if I'm amazing or not, or regardless of if I'm doing something no one else ever has or not, but like educating myself on political topics and things is a response to that other era of passivity and neutrality on every topic. That erasure period, the first period, a permanence period, I would consider I was also very politically convicted. Like, I was not necessarily politically, but like socially, which is inherently political, but like I was convicted about there's so many big issues in the world, but I was addressing the wrong issues because there were things that you can solve, but I think now I have a deeper understanding of those structures and systems behind those scenarios. Good morning, it is 9:30. I stayed up too late last night with my friend Mahiro and her boyfriend Jackson. We were making art together. You can actually see that little dark one over there, that's mine. I just made it last night. It was like a good 3 or 4 hours of working on it, so nothing like too big, but it was fun. I've never really painted before. I think that was my first actual time painting, especially as an adult. Obviously as a kid you fiddle around with it, but it's just expected of you rather than something you have to seek out, which is just a shame, by the way. I think it's such a shame that we have to stop being artists at any point in time. In fact, I'm feeling this really this almost grief that I ever stopped, and then also fear that I'm never going to be able to make things again, which is, I know, it's very wrong, and it's only going to drive me to seek those things out and make them more. But it's crazy though, how fun it is, and also fun relieving and relaxing. But also way harder than I remembered. I am so critical of myself, and I forgot how much that comes through when I'm making things, especially if I've never done it before. I was extremely disappointed by the level of self-critique that came out of me, literally audibly. I was like, this is terrible, this is so bad. The fact of the matter is, every piece has a point that's terrible. It's whether you push past that or overcome by it. And there's nothing skill level that will make that better or worse, except for you to know by experience that all you have to do is lean into that and push past it. But yeah, last night was really eye-opening, I think, in several ways. One way that it was very eye-opening is the realization that there really are people out there that are like me. And that's such a dumb, obvious statement because I'm just a person. There's tons of people like me. But I grew up in a very different, where everybody just had different goals, So, there wasn't anyone who thought similarly, or the people that did were definitely, still different from me. And I just was overcome constantly by this sense of, loneliness. And I think last night was really eye-opening to recognize that the loneliness isn't permanent. And I didn't realize that it wasn't something constant. And I know that to some extent, no one else is going to understand my creative process the same way or be in my own mind as I'm processing my own emotions. But as far as the ways that we've been passionate about creating things, I didn't realize how little I've loved, like how little I remembered how much I love it. That's a really weird way to say that, but I forget how much I love it sometimes. Yeah, there we go. That's a little more concise. Um, and there was this phases that I went through when I was creating. Um, and when I first started making art, I think I was like 13 or 14. I would consider that when I consistently started making it as um, a consistent part of my everyday life. Like I couldn't get through a day without making something. I consider that this phase of permanence. Like everything was crazy, so in order to find some semblance of meaning, it was making for proving my existence. And to try to, the assumption that I wasn't going to live past a certain point. I was like, well, I have to make things, and if I don't make them, it's like I never lived. And it was this very not fear-driven necessarily, but like the passion was out of this knowledge that I wasn't going to live forever, and a desire to create a legacy that would outlive me. But you can't control how people remember you, and I felt like no one understood me or was interested in me, like, to understand how I worked for a long time. So it was like I was also trying to explain myself in my work. Just like now, wow, this comes full circle. But I already know who I am. It's just talking to a phone now. But yeah, the projects that I would do were passionate. Like I was very passionate about hard topics and educating myself, but then becoming so like, and I was a teenager, I had teenager level of understanding about the complexities and nuances of issues. So I was like trying to solve the end symptom, and I didn't know that there was an underlying cause, and just like oversimplifying everything. But I still think that was a good phase of my creative process. That probably went from 13 to 18. It was what I would call like permanence. It was maybe the phase of trying to create something permanent. And then I hit college. Actually, I would say it's before then. Maybe senior year, I had a toxic friendship that really destroyed my view of myself, to create myself into somebody who is nothing more than a supporting role, rather than, a protagonist or main character. It was someone that was going through a lot, so like you try and support them, but it really wasn't my role to be in that, especially she was like 25, so 26. But yeah, it's really like it was a weird, I think a piece of me broke at that point, of like creativity became a terrible idea because I didn't want to create something that would outlive me. I remember walking with my sister. We would look at buildings all the time and be critiquing them and pointing things out. And I remember this phase of my life. I looked at this older building that was worn down and no one lived in it anymore. And I was like, I don't want to ever build a building because I don't want to have a permanent structure that can be a burden on the world after I'm gone. I don't think that's inherently a wrong thing. I don't think constructing new buildings for the sake of constructing new buildings is the most efficient or safe way to go, or not necessarily safe, because it is safer probably sometimes, but I still don't think it's the smartest sustainability-wise, or, just if it's not a good design, don't do it. Like, I don't know. That's just personal, but, yeah, so I remember walking down the street looking at that house and being like, yeah, I could never build a building because I don't want it to be like that. I don't want it to be a burden. I don't want to be, an empty house that people have to deal with after I'm gone. That was my thinking on it, and I went through this phase through a couple years. I would say up till like, honestly, September. This phase was that mindset and that thinking of impermanence and erasure and destroying what was wrong instead of building what's good. I went through extreme minimalism at that point. I was getting rid of almost everything I owned to get the bare minimum, which was good. I honestly, I had the bare minimum, and then I've since built onto my own personal style, so I think it was a good phase that I went through, but it was still a temporary one and not a permanent state. because it was just erasure of style. It wasn't a simplified style. So now I think that's since grown, but it was an erasure of what I didn't like. And it was all about going back to trying to build something new, but on the basis of destruction of someone that I didn't really like, which was who I was in high school. Someone who was overly dependent on friends, like unhealthy in a lot of ways, but I didn't look at those other causes. I was just looking at my own moral worth in the things I didn't like about myself. So I was struggling a lot with my own relationship with myself in this phase of impermanence. Every art project and class that we took, I threw out 98%. Actually, I think I threw out almost all of them, or I gave the other pieces to my mom or other people. Like, I didn't want to see them ever again. Because to me, they were, and I still agree with that, like, they're still art projects that I didn't really have a lot of emotional weight invested in. They weren't me, they were a project, So, I don't know. As far as, like, that, it was okay. It's just hard to, I guess, see your successes when you're always throwing away your progress. And I used to do that all the time with scrap paper anyway, but that's because those were actually trash. But my mom used to, like, pull them out of the trash and be like, no, these are so good. I'm like, no, these were practices. Like, I'm not keeping these sketches. But yeah, that phase of impermanence, sorry, I'm checking out my oatmeal. The phase of impermanence lasted up till, I think, recently, honestly, with, ending a relationship that really did cost a lot more of my, like, if I didn't know who I was, which I didn't at that point, it was really hard to present myself in a relationship truly, and so, there were some misunderstandings and romanticizations of a person that doesn't really exist. So, of course, once I started to step into who I wanted to be, or at least make any kind of statement on my own opinions, we started to have, like, but it was building up for a long time before that. Why am I talking about this one? This is not really the most relevant. But yeah, there was, a good year of me dating the person, and over that year, I was forgetting who I was, and it's not personal, it's just the way I was, the stage that I was at. That's still impermanence of not wanting to create something for the fear of rejection, and it was all about hiding myself from rejection, which was what I felt a lot in high school and socially. As a kid too, with I was in Awana for 10 years and only talked to kids my age like once or twice, because it was just this level of social rejection because I didn't dress like them, look like them, and I just didn't know how to reach out and talk first. I didn't know that was an option. So anyway, this is like all over the place with this, but I think the phase I'm at now, I would consider it more impermanent permanence, of like recognizing that while this is a season of my life that I'm able to do all these things and living my life, and this is who I am right now, it's still allowed to change, and I'm allowing it to change continually, but I'm allowed to also live despite not knowing what the end result is going to be. And I think part of the impermanence phase was this thinking that I had to be one particular kind of person before I was allowed to be accepted. And it's just rejecting myself so much more than anything else. But yeah, that's kind of my phases of making. I'm very thankful that I'm at where I am now, and also being able to create along with other people who are in a similar, like, love for art and similar ways of thinking, just because it's, like, I mean, I'm always a fan of being with people that think differently from you, but I think you also need people who think the same way, and I didn't realize how much I needed that until last night, and I was kind of terrified by that. I was terrified by the realization that all these things that people have been telling me make me so different. You're, like, so good at this, you're so good at that, you're amazing, you're talented, and, like, all of a sudden, the same person with this, another person with the same exact set of skills as me exists, and they're also wonderful. Wow, like, that's so cool that I'm not the only person, and I feel so much less lonely now. And it just, like, sets pride aside, 'cause it's like, I was never special to begin with, like, never special in that sense to begin with, so I'm really thankful that that lie is gone, at least broken down a little bit. Anyway, all that to say, I'm gonna go eat my breakfast and read my newspaper, so can't stop this button. I can't push it. I really don't think I was made to stay up till 1 a.m. these nights. Like, ugh. It's made it the next day, like, terrible every single time. And it sucks, honestly. So, ugh. This is a note to future me to, like, maybe avoid that in the future. Because, like, I feel bad right now. I think a huge part of why I've felt this sense of grief and sadness lately is that I am leaving tomorrow, and I'm going to be going home where I won't have access to this really nice artsy lifestyle that I have right now. Not that there's anything wrong with taking breaks from it. I think I need this break. It's going to help me be more thankful for it, and it's going to help me, create better stuff when I come back. But I feel the sense of, like, I think a sense of grief that I usually have when I go home, and that, like, I am feeling this pressure to just stop being me. And no one's asking me to, it's just that tends to be what happens. But I have to keep reminding myself that I'm doing it differently this time, that I'm trying to set myself up for success. I'm trying to set myself up for a situation where I can still be myself and still be confident in what I think and what I believe. It's just going to be fighting myself, internally. And I just, like, I don't know, I feel like it's manifesting a little bit physically. Like, I feel a little bit sick, like, stomach ache, like, really lethargic. And I know that the big part of that is because I stayed up too late, but I think a bigger part is that idea that I'm going to have to completely stop doing what I like doing when I go home. Which in some cases is going to be true. In some cases it's going to be a lot of, hey, I'm not going to try and do schoolwork all the time when I'm home. But it's still such a big, like, it gives me so much life to work on, capstones and other things that I don't think it's fair that, I should just turn this part of myself completely off. I don't think that's smart. And, like, I know the goal of being home isn't to work on this stuff, so yeah, I'm really glad I concentrated and made the progress that I have towards understanding myself and towards trying to heal and grow. But the amount of growth that still needs to happen for, like, capstones and my portfolio, it's just not gonna happen in today. Like, it's just not gonna happen. Especially with, like, packing, doing laundry, doing dishes. Being a human being takes a lot of work, especially a healthy one requires a lot of work. So I'm also probably going to go to the gym later to relieve some of this anxiety and stress that I'm feeling. Going to make some tea, I think, because I was going to drink coffee, and then, that's another part of it. I haven't had coffee, but, like, I hate my dependence on caffeine at the moment. I wanted to go get, like, an espresso really bad, but I was like, I can't afford that, and I also can't justify it. Like, I'm not doing big level work. I'm not doing anything too crazy, so, I can't justify it. But all that to say, I'm feeling a lot of internal stress and disappointment. I think it's a disappointment in that I haven't been able to make more progress, and, like, the idea that I have to just stop doing what I like doing when I go home. So it's just a really hard balance, and it's been harder for me to concentrate on things because I'm still feeling that, like, oh, I have to go. Like, I have to let go of this, But that's what makes it fun, is that it's temporary. Everything is, I know that, but it's still always hard. I feel like I'm grieving this time already, and it's not even over. Because this is going to be one of those times I look back on and I'm like, dang, I'm really glad I got to do that. But also, I really wish I had a better sleep schedule. Like, even setting an alarm consistently would have been better. That is the only thing I think I'd change about this, as well as maybe slightly more scheduling. But it's been a nice, like, intentional relief from my schedule, so I'll be okay. I'll bounce back, I'm sure. I'm not too worried about it, but yeah, that's how I feel. So we had a bunch of eggs in the bottom of our fridge that were like broken and not good. And I was like, I could just throw these out. Or I was like, you know what I haven't done yet? Sculptural stuff. So I am, if my roommates see this, I cleaned it up. I promise. I promise I will clean it up. But I'm borrowing a few things. Yeah, they're probably going to be a little bit upset, but you know what? It's okay. It's for art, so it's worth it. Yeah, we're going to see how that goes. I already made a chicken out of some newspaper, spray paint, and some tape. Now I'm making like a coop with a trash can. I'm also going to be cracking those eggs soon, so I'm excited about that. Honestly, I'm not sure how to talk about this in a way that's helpful, so I'm just gonna go for it. And this is my vlog, so I can share my life and my experiences. I've been listening to The Ripper Retold, and it has been really healing a part of me that I didn't know was a problem. Like, I used to be really into true crime. This summer and the beginning of the school year, it was kind of this addiction that I was not really able to fully get past. Like, anytime I was alone too much, it was just what I'd listen to. And it was getting, like, it was so much of my life just ended up being listening to that. And I don't know what that does to, like, we're not made to handle that much trauma of other people, that we have this compassion fatigue, and I think it kind of becomes distorted when there's too much of such a heavy topic. Especially for me, considering my mom actually went to prison when I was 14 for an attempted homicide. And it was all, like, mental health stuff, and, like, she's obviously much better now, and it's not the same as those cases at all, like, at all. But it's still heavy. Like, they all did have mental health stuff, too. It's not like they were in their best places when they did these things. But I just, listening to this new podcast talking about The Ripper Retold, talks about Jack the Ripper and how, like, the emphasis on the victims and the stories about the victims. There was 1 or 2 episodes in the podcast for the true crime stuff that I was listening to. Now, I will say, the one that I was listening to was a good one. Like, it wasn't trying to romanticize or dramatize or anything. It was just talking about it, but by talking about those things, you're talking about these horrible, horrible things, and I was starting to become almost numb to them, just because I've, like, was listening to so much of it. And she's still putting out good content. I'm not listening to it now. It was one of my top, like, Spotify shows, because that was what I was, like, depending on for some strange reason. But I'm past it now. I'm recognizing that it's not good for me, and that it is a form of almost gaslighting my own emotions, but being like, oh, because what you experienced isn't as bad as these victims, and at least they're not as bad as that. Like, it was starting to feel very, like, invalidating the fact that it even happened. So, yeah, and I think there's this horrible other message, too, that some people are just born monsters. I definitely think that there's a lot of factors that go into making these horrible things happen. But any kind of oversimplification isn't helpful, and you can't oversimplify. Like, you can't get through just an hour-long podcast without oversimplifying things significantly. For where I'm at now, I really can't take it right now. I really can't handle it, because I am genuinely healing from the past instead of running from it. So it's like my nerves are all raw, so it's not a smart thing for me to expose myself to such graphic content. I don't know that it's good for anyone. I am concerned by the fascination, and I think a lot of it is, just an unhealthy escapism from life, and it had a role to play. It was a tool that I used to get through a hard time, but I'm really glad that I'm past it, and I'm still ashamed that I did listen to it as much as I did. Because for me, it was never a healthy thing. It wasn't helpful. But yeah, that is my little confession. True crime it's fine if that's what you want to listen to. I'm just realizing that listening to horrible things happening to people who don't deserve them is just preparing me mentally for horrible things to happen to me, or for me to do horrible things to other people. Like, it's just not a healthy thing for me to be exposed to, because it's just getting me desensitized to the traumas and sufferings in the world. Like, for me, there's a reason I don't listen to or watch news. I don't really watch news on TV. I get a newspaper because I'm able to read my emotional levels and be like, okay, can I handle this much, like, hearing about terrible things happening in the world? Okay, we'll just read the headline and move on. But if it's like, yeah, other days I can read more. But even then, I'm processing it at my own pace. There's no overstimulation with graphic content, no overstimulation with, like, music and sounds and people's explanations of themselves. There's time to process it and time to grieve it and move on. But yeah, that's part of why I'm reading the newspaper instead of watching TV. But yeah, all that is all over the map. But yeah, don't just question yourself if you're getting interested in true crime. Ask yourself a lot of questions, because it's not a passive pastime. You're either actively participating in normalizing these horrible actions, or you are numbing yourself to compassion, or it's just another thing that you really don't have time to process fully. Like, that's a really harsh accusation to say that, like, but I genuinely don't. I think it's vulgar most of the time, more than helpful. And as interesting as these cases can be, you have to be really careful not to make these things feel more normal than they ever were meant to be. And that, I think true crime also can often promote abuse of women in normal life, and can help desensitize to those smaller levels of suffering as well, that aren't necessarily horrible, horrific murders, but, just, average abuse. Ugh, it's such a broken thing, and I know that we're broken people, and it's only going to happen in different ways. I'm probably going to have a different thing to close off and work through, but that's part of being human, and I don't really regret I regret part of it. I know that I depended on that to get me through a really hard time. I'm really glad I'm past that time, and I hope I'm never back there. But at the same time, it was never healthy. It was never a passive observation, and I don't think it should be taken lightly. So that is my hot take. I could be wrong. I hope I'm right, actually, because, like, I think it's genuinely something people should take seriously. True crime community is just so messed up, and it did start with Jack the Ripper, which is why The Ripper Retold is such a good podcast to listen to, and spreading awareness and true reality and true facts about the situations, as well as just empathizing with the victims and understanding their whole lives leading up to those events. So, okay, that has been it for me right now. I might show some stuff later, I don't know, but I do plan to go to the gym soon and have a pretty chill evening. I'm leaving tomorrow, so it should be pretty chill. But as I'm a real grown-up, I'm gonna go change the oil in my car, or see if it needs to be changed and then change it. JK, it's not time to be an adult about that, but it is time to be an adult about returning my library books before I leave. I don't have to return all of them, but I do have to return a few of them, so I want to go ahead and do that now. I'm gonna double check that they're fine until the 7th, but they should be. I just got them out like a week ago, so. The peak of this break now is this Mexican ice cream. It's Mexican chocolate ice cream. It's technically not Mexican ice cream, it's Jenny's, so. I also mostly got this because I was hungry, and Condado's Tacos seems like a sit-down kind of place. I'm just not in a sit-down kind of mood. You sit down at a restaurant when you have someone to talk to, not when you're alone. I had another thought on the true crime stuff that I talked about. I watched a video just now about how, like, people who enjoy true crime are disproportionately women. A lot of that is because there's very strict societal expectations. I'm using all the big words because it was a very pretentious video. Just like I'm being pretentious right now. No, it was like showing how a lot of women are expected to behave a certain kind of way in most cases, and there's a lot of social pressure to act the right way. I actually rewatched the episode from Black Mirror too, so it was like extra fresh in my mind. The one where the social network or whatever, the one where everyone's like, that's not what it's called. Nosedive? Yeah, that's the name of the episode. Or everyone's like voting on her. I'd seen so many clips from it that I like couldn't get through the whole thing. I still couldn't. It's too boring to me, and honestly, it is cringy, and I think it's that idea of social rejection that I don't feel like confronting, and that fear of not being interesting or attractive. The idea of having this abject, treatment, being treated like an other, and being treated as, a 2 or whatever on the out of 5 or for her thing, or even lower. So I don't know. It's just like crazy to see that consistent. I don't know. It's just interesting to notice that I ended up listening to a lot of true crime stuff during a time where I didn't feel like I could be honest about my emotions on anything. And that was probably the closest to like just being the most like, I have to perform my, role as a woman in this situation. I have to be polite. I have to be kind or whatever. And like just holding on to that instead of expressing my own emotions. I would literally just like cry for no reason and not be able to explain it. But like other than that, like I couldn't confront the realities in front of me because I was too afraid of like being rejected. Anyway, all that to say, it makes sense that I got into true crime during that period of my life. It also makes sense that I don't need it anymore because I am in a better place now where I'm not afraid of social rejection if I express my emotions. And I've since expressed them in pretty big ways, like smashing a teacup, burning things, doing that kind of stuff that isn't socially acceptable. Even today, the weird egg art that I made, that feels very illegal, Like it feels like someone's gonna come up and be like, you're crazy. Like, what the heck are you doing? But it's like, it's catharsis. And the same thing with that messy painting that I made too. Like, it's not like illegal to express your emotions. But yeah, that's all that to say. I'm very glad that I'm not in that stage of life now where I can express my emotions, and I don't feel that need to have other people's extreme emotions exist or extreme situations exist for me to feel like I can, it just like was a weird dependence on that, I think. I don't know. It's interesting to think about. I don't know. I'm not saying that conclusively, but it makes sense. Yeah. Anyway, it is now 9:36 on Tuesday, December 21st, 2021. 2021. Anyway, I'm gonna go to bed, and I start my long trek eastward. I couldn't think of like east or west. It's eastward, back home. So catch you guys tomorrow. I am gonna try and get some good sleep. First stop done, bathroom break, and now we're back on the road.